Hey everyone, today I want to talk about All That Jazz from 1979 by Bob Fosse. This is the 20th episode of my 1000 favorite movie series, where I talk about the movies I love the most in a random order. The Backstage musical has been one of the most popular forms of musicals for as long as musicals have been around. They all revolve around the simple premise of putting on a show, usually on Broadway, or as in the case of Singing in the Rain, making a movie. Out of the rich history of this subgenre, one of the most unique and innovative is this movie, All That Jazz, in many different ways. It was certainly something of a revelation to me when I first saw it, expecting it to be just another musical. Instead, I got a movie closer to 8.5 than 42nd Street. By the way, if you want to see more videos about more of my favorite movies with more Great Japan locations, well, good news, I upload a new one every Friday, so please like and subscribe to see them all. I'm a very small channel, so every new like and subscription is much appreciated. Thanks so much. Now back to the movie. It's about Joe Gideon, a dance choreographer and theater director who's said to be modeled after Fosse himself. Between his new musical, his editing of a film, and his unstable personal life, he has a lot going on in his life that turns out is not healthy for him. He's played by Roy Scheider in kind of a surprising casting, but he fits the role like a glove. He's not exactly convincing as a great dancer, but he is convincing as someone who simply takes things as they come and finds pleasure where he can, including in drinking, smoking, and as much sex as possible. It doesn't take long until we realize that he's actually in pretty bad shape, as the theme of death is introduced basically from the beginning, and comes right to the fore in the back half of the film. Kind of an unusual theme for a musical. We also get an angel of death figure, played by Jessica Lange, who's in Gideon's head and talks with him throughout the whole movie. She talks to him on this theater stage with various lights and props lying around. Sometimes people are introduced, such as Gideon's mother, who talks with Death about his childhood. This scene really brings 8.5 to the forefront of the mind. Anyway, the portrayal of Death is really interesting, as she looks more like an angel, and Jessica Lange conjures all the motherly warmth she can, I guess to seduce him into dying for whatever reason. This happens relatively frequently in the movie, and I wouldn't have minded even more of this interaction, as we get to see more honest Gideon as he flirts with his own looming death. Because the theme of death is hammered home so much in the film, and Gideon clearly shows some sort of fascination with it, I guess I wanted to know a little more about why he has sort of a near death wish. But even without this explanation, the film visualizes this feeling really well, which is the power of this movie. One way the film shows his feelings is through the musical numbers, at least in the back half of the movie. This movie doesn't have too many numbers, and one of them is presumably while he gets heart surgery. Well, it's not just one song, but really four short ones right after the other on this imaginary movie set. It stars the three most important women in his life: his daughter, his ex wife, and his girlfriend, as they sing about their relationships and his issues. The thing I love the most is the atmosphere, how it takes place on this big soundstage with cameras and lights all over the place. Meanwhile, we can see him being operated on in the background. During this whole sequence, Gideon is incapacitated on a hospital bed, while another Gideon acts as the director of the numbers. It's insane. The other imaginary musical number is at the end, where he sings on a kind of show along with the host about how he thinks he's going to die. This is by far the most memorable song in the movie, singing about death in such an upbeat way. The audience in the show is basically everyone who ever meant anything to him, and he goes around thanking them all. If I did have a criticism, it would be that this lays the message on maybe a little too thick for me. Again, without that clear reason why he's at least interested in dying, it seems a tiny bit forced. But it's hard to deny the movie's visceral impact in dealing with death and death imagery, surely a subject matter unusual for a backstage musical. But speaking of the backstage musical, before Gideon gets put in the hospital, we get a slightly more typical plot involving him putting on a show, and balancing that with his personal life. But the way the movie presents this is anything but typical. For one, the biggest musical number in this half of the movie is a presentation to the show's backers of a cheesy song that, halfway through, changes to an erotic orgy-like production with the dancers stripping and ripping clothes off. For another, the editing is very unorthodox. From the opening, recurring montage of getting ready for the day, which consists of things like smoking in the shower and taking medicine, to the table read scene where the only audio we hear is various noises Gideon makes, like breathing, footsteps, and his cigarette in the ashtray, taking us inside his head. There's also all the editing back and forth between real life and the Jessica Lange scenes, so we can hear Gideon comment on his behavior as he's doing it in real life, for instance. It all helps to present the portrait of a talented, but knowingly selfish man ruled by his vices, which are starting to really take hold of him. And Scheider is so believable in the role that his performance and the movie's formal invention truly complement each other well. As for my favorite moments, the first one is unusual. I don't know whether to call it a proper musical number, as the movie makes it difficult to define them, but I love the scene where the composer, played by Anthony Holland, sings his new creation, the really cheesy song that was later turned into the erotic number. Seeing how enthusiastically he sings this really dumb, but admittedly catchy and bouncy, song with his interesting voice has always struck me for some reason, and I always enjoy watching this scene. It also strikes kind of a strange note because earlier in the movie, the same character was shown to be pretty vulgar and hostile, which is the exact opposite tone of the song he's presenting. I also love the iconic montage that I mentioned earlier of Gideon getting ready for the day in the bathroom. Set to Vivaldi, the scene is an energetic edit that recurs throughout the movie, all of them ending with him saying, "Showtime, folks." The montage gradually changes each time it happens, with it getting more despairing each time, sometimes being cut with him in different scenes of him coughing or on the respirator. My favorite cut is one time after he says, "Showtime, folks," we cut to this shot with no music, where he says, "Showtime," again. Another recurring scene is that before we get the big number at the end, we see the same show on TV two times, and the host always says the same lines, introducing his next guest, saying, "A great entertainer, a great humanitarian, and my dearest, dearest friend." But before he finishes, Gideon always turns the TV off at the same time. It's kind of like a funny tease the movie does of always cutting the host off before we know who he's talking about. But before the ending, I guess we find out. But this time, he changes his lines to "a so-so entertainer, not much of a humanitarian, and this cat was never nobody's friend." It's really a clever bit, and makes for a suspenseful build-up when we finally get to the finale. Finally, special mention to the TV critic who gives Gideon's new movie a bad review. I love how when she says negative things, everyone around him insults her and tries to diminish her credibility, not believing that someone would say anything bad about it. The producer in particular is funny, angrily pointing and screaming. The whole scene works because a lot of the time you can't even hear the TV because everyone keeps talking over her, showing that they don't care about what she's actually saying. But in the end, what I love about All That Jazz is that it's such an ambitious retooling of the movie musical that isn't perfect, but is difficult to forget. I remember when I first saw it, the editing in particular blew me away, taking us into the mind of an original character facing death square in the face with reckless abandon. It's one of my 1000 favorite movies. Thanks for watching my video. Goshou makoto ni arigatou gozaimasu. Have you seen All That Jazz? Let me know what you think in the comments. I think of all my favorite movies as my friends, and I think my audience is friends too. Remember, I upload a new video every Friday, so if you want to help me complete this 1000 favorite movies epic, don't forget to like and subscribe.